Ideastream, a conglomeration of 3 stations, 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, and WCLV Classical 104.9, all coming together under one roof. National attention has been directed to this new model for public service media, combining 3 separate media organizations under one nonprofit organization. Today, I'm here with Maxie Jackson, the station manager of 90.3 WCPN, and Jenny Northern, the station manager of 104.9 Classical Radio, to discuss how these 3 organizations came together, the current success of the organization in the Northeast Ohio sector, and how public media platforms are being shaped for the future nationwide. Thanks again for being here, Maxie and Jenny. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, good to have you.
Great. So starting off, I know you are both station managers, Jenny of WCLV and Maxie of WCPN. I guess, what is one word or one kind of phrase to sum up your job?
Am I going first?
You can. Ladies first.
Okay, gratifying. It's very gratifying. It's gratifying to be a part of an organization that I think makes a difference, that contributes to the quality of life here in Northeast Ohio. For me in particular, I find it really gratifying to work in classical radio. I minored in music when I was in college. Music is near and dear to my heart. I've always loved classical music, so I find it gratifying to work with people who really know their stuff when it comes to classical radio.
So the gratification of it and just feeling like you're doing a justice for the community is what makes you...
Absolutely. I really do believe that we make a difference. I believe that Ideastream listens to the community, tries to respond to the community on a regular basis, and I think that's really important.
And for you, Maxie, how do you feel that being a station manager resonates with you?
Well, first of all, I'll piggyback the statement you just made and say I think the phrase I would use is public service media. I mean, at the end of the day, our real goal across all of our platforms is to serve a community, even more so than an audience, but to serve a community, Northeast Ohio, and beyond, depending on the tool. The internet, of course, is global by default, so I'll add it that way. In terms of how this serves me, I worked in commercial media for years, but realized at the end of my stint in that the content really didn't serve me, and that I felt like I spent a lot of time working on things that in the end were disposable. I've never felt that way about public service media, whether I was working at a jazz station, an African-American targeted public radio station, or working as I am now as the head of an NPR affiliate. So to me, it's about public service. It's about creating content that has real value to the citizens.
So you said working towards something that's almost indisposable,
Yeah.
as you said. I know I was reading an article. It was called PBS Acting as a Network as well as a Service, actually. And it says it thanks the Honey Boo Boos, the Real Housewives, and the Naked Castaways for kind of taking up the primetime slots on competing networks, and also with commercial radio as well. How do you think that public broadcast has an edge over public media organizations?
I'll give a quick answer to that. I think the first thing to understand is that from the very beginning, public media has had an educational initiative or directive, if you will. We were funded to provide an educational service and also to serve audiences that were not being serviced by commercial media, and to provide formats in some instances that also were unavailable. So if you start from there, I think where the Honey Boo Boos and all those commercial assets you mentioned sort of play down to the audience, I think we've held a higher standard, expecting more of the audience, knowing that they demand more, and playing to, I won't say a highbrow, but an intellectually curious, a civically engaged citizen who wants to know what's going on, wants to be fully informed, and be actively engaged in what's going on. So that's, to me, what we do, as opposed to some of the commercial media outlets and the primetime television, as you said. There's good stuff there. Not all of it, but there is good stuff in commercial media. I just think public media at its best, I don't think anything serves better.
I think we in public media hold ourselves to a higher standard because the public holds us to a higher standard. So it works all the way around.
And I know that you guys have 2.8 million people who access Ideastream services every single month. I guess we're supported by, Ideastreams supported by membership campaigns that reach out to the community to pledge their support to the station. Through your experience, how has Ideastreams' involvement in the community increased its success, kind of going off of the public aspect and being a community informer?
Well, I think Ideastream, the coming together initially of WVIZ, PBS, and WCPN 90.3, there's strength in numbers. And I think coming together allowed Ideastream to begin the process of figuring out how to super serve this community. And it really started with the Listening Project. The Listening Project is something that Ideastream does every year, trying to identify what the community sees as the region's challenges and assets, and then responding, looking for themes, looking for ways that Ideastream can respond specifically to the challenges. We're all, I think most of us who live in Northeast Ohio say, wow, you know, we have great arts and culture here. We have this great metro park system, and the lake is a great resource, and we have healthcare here that's, you know, it's really second to none. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
And so it's the challenges that I think we try to address, and some of those challenges are jobs, crime. You know, those are the things that always come to the top. Mm-hmm. The issues of employment, the issues of crime, the issues of education. And I think Ideastream has brought those challenges to the fore and provided means of convening people to discuss those challenges. And it started with the Quiet Crisis series in conjunction with the Plain Dealer from 2001 to 2004, dealing with these issues of crime, dealing with the issues of loss of manufacturing jobs, the brain drain, headquarters moving out of the region, mm-hmm. and saying how as a community are we going to address these? I mean, the first thing when you see a problem is you have to clearly articulate what it is, and then try to determine what the reasons are, and then only then can you begin to try to tackle it.
So like through the Listening Project and through these kind of, it's like a personal, it's almost like you're like PBS and WCPN and WCLV, they're like a listening ear to you, and they're kind of like your friend to say, hey, this is what's going on in the community, mm-hmm. and this is what we need to address, and this is what needs to get out.
This is what's going on in our community.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we are included in that. And so the mission of Ideastream is to strengthen our communities. Mm-hmm. And we can only do that when we listen, when we pay attention, when we try to raise awareness about these issues. And right now, I think that we're at a point, we were just talking about this in a recent content managers meeting, we're at a point where we're effectively communicating, it's like media-driven awareness. We are focusing on these issues all the time. Mm-hmm. And the next step is how do we figure out how to achieve some collective outcomes?
Yeah.
And that's always the biggest challenge, mm-hmm. but that is the goal.
So let me add on to that. I think, in my opinion, one of the most important developments over the last 10 to 15 years in our field is this notion of community engagement. What Jenny really spoke to is this notion of the station serving as a listening ear to the community's needs, wants, and aspirations. In other words, how can we map the community, identify the influential folk, not necessarily political or elected officials, but just people who are high touch in the community, who can help inform us as to what is important. And again, the Listening Project is a way we do that. Once we have that information, it's our responsibility to respond to it, to create content, to do media that really speaks on those issues as articulated by the community. So we are as much a reflection of the community as we are attempting to help direct the community in a way to continue to solve, resolve, and address issues that abound. So that's sort of that community engagement approach, I think, is fundamental to what we do as public service media, that we don't often find in commercial media. I think commercial media, I used to always tell my students when I used to teach back in the day, it's money-driven. Public media is mission-driven.
And so it's a reflection of the community through a service. And kind of going off of that, I know that it's very different from commercial media in that we get much of our funding from the viewers and listeners. I guess going off of that, how do you think that the community involvement kind of brings people to support the station? Like, and how do you think that it benefits it as a model?
Yeah, I think we have two different examples, and so I'll give you the news perspective. I think first and foremost, the community doesn't have to pay to support us. It is, in some respects, their statement that we are worthy of their investment. We like the phrase a sound investment, and because we're audio, an audio service for the most part, except for television, obviously. But they understand that this is a service that is member supported, either through tax dollars or direct donations from individuals or foundations. That's how we make our money. Of course, we do underwriting, which is a variation on the advertising theme, but a healthy public media operation is well over 50% supported by individuals, people just like you, me, and everyone else watching this broadcast. And so from a news perspective, we are an NPR affiliate. NPR is a national programming service. There are no NPR stations. There are NPR affiliates, stations independent of NPR that carry NPR, may carry the BBC, may carry PRI or Public Radio International, American Public Media, and other independent programming. At the end of the day, we carry that content and we bring it to the community, we customize it, we localize it, and if we do it successfully, then the local community supports that.
And kind of going off of that, I know that you have just moved here from DC, and you've been serving as the president and CEO for the National Federation of Community Broadcasters. I guess, what similarities and differences do you see in Ideastreams' approach to public radio broadcasts, and how does it compare to the trend of the national trend of the affiliates?
Well, I think the first thing I have to say is that the constituency I had as president of the NFCB were not necessarily stations like WCPN and the stations that you find under the Ideastream umbrella. They are mostly rural and minority service stations that I was president and CEO with, or working for, if you will. So a lot of my work was going on the Hill, lobbying for funding because of the special needs of Native American stations, preserving language and culture in very remote regions of the country, clearly not in areas that are financially solvent enough to support themselves. Latino, African American, even Asian public broadcasting services, and of course rural stations all over the country. I wouldn't say that the stations at Ideastream are anything like what I worked with there. These are what we call grassroots stations. These are hardcore community stations. They don't take any funding from anything but individuals, usually. Wow. The underwriting model is very primitive, if at all, exists in some of those stations. And some of your listeners or viewers may have heard of the Pacifica radio networks. That's a more leftist version of public broadcasting. They're part of that system as well. So we're not talking about mainstream public radio. We're not talking about NPR affiliates. We're talking about stations that almost all of their programming is local, live. A lot of it is music oriented. When it's public affairs and news, it again is very organic, homegrown content. And so my role was really to create best practices so that they could upgrade their model from a 70s era format, style, and presentation to something more digital friendly and obviously 21st century. So
from what I'm understanding, you kind of work to help these grassroots stations evolve into, they're influenced by, they're funded by the public, but also to become effective moving forward.
Well, I think whether you're at a major station like the ones we're at in a mid-sized market, or you're a grassroots station, you still have to work and operate efficiently. There's no other way around it. It costs money to produce content. And if you're going to do it effectively, if you're going to aggregate audience, if you're going to provide a service that people value, you have to do it at a level that people appreciate and respect. And so my role, again, was just to create standards, best practices that many of these stations didn't have. Some did, but to make sure that we were operating at a higher level to support membership of the national organization, but more importantly, to make sure we were providing great public service in these rural and minority communities.
So kind of going off that with Jenny, kind of making the calls, I guess, in like Maxie's doing, he's kind of making the calls and how to establish grassroots radio stations across the country. I guess you joined WCLV Classical Radio back in 2001, and then WCLV was the last of the 3 stations, joined Ideastream back in December of 2010, and then it transitioned after that to the non-commercial model under the operation of Ideastream in 2013, just last year. Transforming the music station from a profit to a non-profit organization, how did classical radio come to this decision, and what were some of the most significant differences of that?
Well, WCLV was not the first commercial classical station to transition to a non-commercial model. KING in Seattle had done it, WQXR in New York had done it, WCRB in Boston had done it, all before WCLV did. And so we saw this trend, we were watching it very carefully. We saw that it was a successful transition for those stations. And we said, it gave us confidence that it would be a successful transition for WCLV as well. And essentially, the decision to become a part of Ideastream and to become non-commercial was a decision to preserve the classical radio format in this market. I think the differences, and you touched on this, Maxie, I think one of the big differences between commercial and non-commercial radio is commercial radio is funded by advertisers. And as Maxie said, with non-commercial radio, we have to create content that is compelling enough that people will want to step up and to support the radio station. A listener to a commercial radio station may have a strong affinity for the station. They may be a great fan. They may love it, but they don't have skin in the game.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference, because if you can move a person to a point where they're willing to support the station, they're going to protect that station. As a listener, it becomes my station because I invest in it and I want to see this station succeed, and I will continue to support it. And that's the big difference that I see, is that skin in the game question.
Skin in the game.
Yeah.
And you're talking about people who donate, thousands of dollars to some who do $10 on an annual basis. So the range is very wide. You could say it's democratic in that sense, but at the end of the day, that listener support really does, as you said, create skin in the game.
And kind of going off that to conclude, I was wondering, moving forward, what do you think is in store for the future of public broadcast and with Ideastream? I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. You want to go with that?
Yeah, I think public broadcasting is really exploring the ways to deliver content to people when they want it, how they want it, and the way they want it. And so I think, and I know we're not alone in that. I know that commercial broadcasters are trying to do the same thing. But I think because there is that additional layer of true community service, seeking to serve the community, not just serve up content, not just say, well, here it is, here's this music, or here's this news story, but to serve the community. And I think that's what makes a difference. And people see that. They recognize that. They appreciate the thoughtful approach to the content that we produce. And we produce very different content at our stations, but it's a very thoughtful approach. It's very community oriented. And so I think the future is bright because people always appreciate quality. They appreciate being listened to. They appreciate being responded to. It's just human nature. And that's why I think the future is bright.
But we are not void of challenge. And there's some significant ones on the horizon. The first one really comes from the fact that public media as we know it now was really built off of the baby boomer generation. And they are aging out, literally, aging to the point where we have to replace them if we're going to maintain a public service of weight, of significance. So how do we appeal to Generation X and Generation Y and millennials and all that to continue to make what we do relevant to the folks who will become the major donors, the minor donors, the regular members of the station? That's number one. The second thing is technology is changing rapidly, and it continues to. We didn't talk about digital, which is really sort of the reason why convergence of media happens and why you get an idea stream where you've got all these things, media outlets under one roof. It really starts with digital technology, but that morphs, and now we're at the stage where mobile is the thing. And so as Jenny said, we have to be everywhere. We have to be ubiquitous, a service that can be in many places, in many different forms, and that's a lot of money. It takes a lot of resource to do that, a lot of horsepower, if you will. And so the challenge for us is how do you do that in a financially responsible way? Because that's a hell of a challenge to be able to provide service on so many different platforms and so many ways that, again, respond to the need for public service.
And so as a whole, it's kind of, the whole goal of it is to integrate with the community and to also, evolve with the changes of the baby boomer growth generation.
Yeah.
And, and just to kind of move forward. So I appreciate you guys coming and talking with me here today.
Pleasure.
That's all we have left for some questions. And thank you again to Maxie and Jenny for coming here, giving us some insight about Ideastream and the world of nonprofit broadcast. Thanks for watching the Ideastream Conglomeration, the future of public broadcast.